Hi, I'm Stephanie Dominguez, and I'm a senior attorney with Universal Orlando Resort.
Okay, great. Today we'll go over a few questions, starting with business entity first. We'll discuss whether or not Universal Studios Orlando is a sole proper proprietorship, partnership, LLC, or a corporation.
Okay, and with a big corporation like Universal, the answer is not really that easy. So, the way that our company is set up is we have a parent company, which is Comcast,
Right.
that recently acquired us, that recently bought us in the past few years. And then under the Comcast umbrella is NBC Universal. Okay, so those are both corporations. They issue shares, they have stockholders, just, kind of what you would think of with a corporation.
Right.
Under the NBC Universal umbrella, there are dozens and dozens of entities because we have lots of different businesses. And for, a number of reasons, it makes sense to kind of separate those out. You wouldn't want to put kind of your entire business just in one bucket, because if you get a lawsuit or if there is, a big class action or something like that, that liability would really hurt us if it was
Right.
all in one place.
So it's best to kind of separate
Yeah.
them out.
So even though we have a theme park in Hollywood, for instance, they have a completely different entity than we do here. So the formal kind of official name for Universal Orlando Resort is Universal City Development Partners Limited. People don't know that.
It's way different.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting about that structure is that it is a partnership.
Okay.
Now, contracts are absolutely the backbone of those relationships. It's really hard to say what would be like kind of the most important one, because they all contribute to
They
our
all
business.
probably vary between, which partners you're writing the contracts up for.
Yeah, and we try to keep things as standard as possible. So things like indemnification and limitation of liability and insurance and how we treat our third-party licensors, like those types of things, we try to keep as standard as possible. But because we deal with such a wide variety and things like that you might not even think of, like for instance, I worked on a contract recently with a consultant who's a mathematician who's going to help us come up with a model to kind of forecast attendance rates at the parks.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so in that situation, it's just one consultant and maybe like a two-person firm. So we wouldn't want to hit him with our 45-page
Right.
agreement.
Yeah.
So we understand that, and practically speaking, to help business run, we do make those kind of adjustments.
Okay, next one would be based on our intellectual properties, which ones we see most valuable, how did we acquire those legal rights to those intellectual properties, and I think, same thing, keeping it a little generic,
Sure,
we could
yeah.
maybe just talk about more of the relationship with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. So our intellectual property is absolutely essential to helping us run and to making sure that our guests have such a great interactive experience out
Right.
there. So Universal actually owns very little intellectual property. We license most of it.
Right.
So these agreements are very complex, and a lot of them have very kind of strict requirements for usage. So in some cases, our IP licensors will say, well, we don't want to be mixed with your other IP. We just
Right.
want total billing when we're used in marketing.
Right.
Some don't want to be used in, for instance, we had a contract recently with Snapchat. So some of our IP didn't want to be used on the geofilters on Snapchat. So just things like that we're
Yeah.
always very sensitive to that, because those relationships are so essential to making our parks
Right.
to making our parks work. We have recently acquired DreamWorks, which is a really interesting opportunity for us because that's IP that we're going to own.
Right.
So that'll be putting us in a much different situation as far as just having more freedom and ability to use however we want.
Definitely.
With our new theme park that's opening up in June, the Volcano Bay Water Park down the street, all of that was created internally. So that's the first time that we're going to have a park where there's no
all
licensed
of us.
IP.
Yes.
So legally that makes our job a lot easier because
Right.
we don't have to check with our licensed partners. We don't have to get any sign-offs.
The litigations, if there were any lawsuits or maybe, what if scenarios.
So I mean, generally speaking, because our parks are open to millions of guests every year, our biggest priority is to keep them safe and to make sure that that experience that they're having is thrilling, but also that no one is going to get hurt.
Right.
So those kind of health and safety issues would probably be at the top of the list
Right.
of things that we're trying to avoid. And then from more of a transactional side would be those like intellectual property infringement situations that happen from time to time. So if we had a vendor or a partner who was using intellectual property in the wrong way, like if they were using Harry Potter or Marvel in a way that they did not have permission for,
Right.
we would still be liable for that. We take on that responsibility.
Gotcha.
So that's something, again, any kind of intellectual property litigation can just
Here we go.
can really set you back.
All right, well, great. I think our last question will be on our company's ethics and the ethical culture that you have. I know, I'm sure in the legal department you are tip-top shape for ethical culture, but...
Well, we certainly, like to believe that.
Right.
And particularly in the kind of law that we practice in this department, which has a lot to do with kind of marketing and consumer-facing materials. I'd say we're particularly sensitive to what the customer sees and what the customer's experience is. And because of that, we do try to have a very high standard and to, really make sure that, that there's, I would say that we're very just transparent and that we have clarity, so we don't try to use like a lot of legalese. We don't try to, make things more complicated than they have to be.
Right.
And I think that, that kind of goes to that culture of ethics that I think really the whole company has, from Comcast all the way down to us. So.
Definitely. I agree. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
These answers were more surprising than I imagined.
Well, good.